Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 7th. Well, here we are again, and it seems that nothing interesting has been going on the last 3 days because none of the categories have changed over the last 3 TWBs, of course, with Wanda still a tropical storm in the northern Atlantic and 18E still looking pretty pitiful as a tropical depression in the low latitudes of the eastern Pacific. 85 storms have formed so far this year. It's day 159 of Atlantic hurricane season. Wanda is continuing to exist as a tropical storm, not really looking as good as it did, but it is expected to turn extratropical probably tomorrow night into Monday morning for sure. In the eastern Pacific, we have tropical depression 18E, which is looking pretty disgraceful at the moment. A bare minimum tropical storm peak is the best that it's going to be reaching at this point, while chances are starting to drop for 94E as it enters more hostile conditions. In the western Pacific, it is a complete disgrace here as well. Invest 91W and Invest 92W still have 0% chances of formation. No development is expected of either of these systems as they continue towards the west in the coming days. And the North Indian Ocean, however, it's a completely different story as we have Invest 90A, which is generously being held at a 20% chance for the time being as it makes a very gradual U-turn. There's another concerning area of interest that is to the east of India there, 40% chance of development there. Here's the track forecast for Wanda. Given the fact that it is dying in 36 hours, we've just opted to use the National Hurricane Center cone for this. And you can see that it is expected to start accelerating as it turns post-tropical, and eventually that center will no longer be the case. So while it will be non-traceable by the time we get into Monday evening, some impacts cannot be ruled out in the UK or Ireland. So of course the areas there may need to do some monitoring with Wanda, at least its remnants. In the Atlantic, here's a satellite imagery, and you can see what's going on with Wanda, which seems like it's getting slapped by a cold front to the west of it, or something, because all the convection that it used to have around it has pretty much become pretty displaced from the center now. In the eastern Pacific, you can see the lovely depression that we have, 18E to the far right of your screen, while there is also 94E. Looked pretty good earlier today, but there is some signs that it's not looking as good as it used to, so that is something that we're still monitoring for right now. 91W is that little mess of clouds that has just been fading away Thanos style in the South China Sea, while 92W is hardly noticeable in the Philippines currently. It's just a mess of clouds, so really nothing going on at all in the Western Pacific, which of course is good news given the time frame and the fact that it is November, of course. So let's enjoy it while it persists for sure. Going into the North Indian Ocean, this is what it looks like here. You can see 90A to the west of India there in the Arabian Sea. Not looking too good there, and then of course you can see what is the beginning of that area of interest. We always see that monsoonal pattern that usually helps to develop these areas of interest. And then of course you can see what's going on with Wanda there, which is not looking the greatest. It's a small storm, but there is a cold front that is rapidly approaching this small storm. So at this point it's going to be dealing with quite a bit of fun as it begins its end of its very erratic life. Here's the sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific. They look like this, 27 to 28 degrees Celsius throughout much of the eastern Pacific. Of course, as you head northward, those temperatures decrease. In the Atlantic, the temperatures continue to decrease, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, where the temperatures are around 26 to 27 there. Much of the Caribbean and main development region remain around 27 to 28, while much of the subtropics are of course still cooling as we head towards the end of the season, now in 23 days. Going into the North Indian Ocean, we have the temperatures remaining around 28 degrees Celsius throughout much of the Bay of Bengal, 27 to 28 as you head westwards into the Arabian Sea. In the Western Pacific, the sea surface temperatures remain around 28 to 29 throughout much of the basin. However, as you head northward, especially north of Taiwan, those temperatures quickly drop to 25, and you get even further below as you head north into Japan. Southern Hemisphere, of course, is still slowly warming up as we get closer to the time we start seeing cyclones develop there. Going onwards into the sea surface temperature anomalies, the weak La Nina continues over the eastern Pacific, of course. The Atlantic is still seeing the temperatures above average, while the Western Pacific is also seeing stuff that way. Same applies to the North Indian Ocean, and the Central Pacific is still looking relatively cooler compared to what is supposed to be the average. On this day in 2010, we had cyclonic storm Jal. Of course, while Jal was a tropical storm when it made landfall in India, much of the impacts were actually in Thailand and Malaysia, where over 100 people died due to the precursor of this system. There was also Hurricane Tomas, which was weakening as it pulled away from the Caribbean. Of course, that name would be retired off the Atlantic naming list as well. You can find more on this day, powered by Cyclone History. Their Twitter tag is on the bottom bar below. Well, that brings us over to the next names in the Atlantic. We're off to the auxiliary list, of course, with the first two names remaining, Adria and Braylon. In the Eastern Pacific, the next two names are still Sandra and Terry. And in the Central Pacific, while daylight savings may save Americans in the fact that we get an extra hour of sleep, it won't save the chances of us seeing Hone. In the Western Pacific, the next two names here are Niato, followed by Ray. And in the North Indian Ocean, the next two names here are Jawad, followed by Asani. Moving on over into the Southern Hemisphere season, the Southwestern Indian Ocean will be kicking Anna, followed by Betsy Ray. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody. We'll be back from the Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.